Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Trump administration has announced further cuts in federal funding to Harvard. The Department of Health and Human Services is cutting $60 million in federal grants to Harvard University. It says the school failed to address anti-Semitic harassment and racial discrimination on campus. It's the latest in a wave of federal actions targeting the Ivy League institution. The Trump administration has already frozen or canceled nearly $3 billion in federal support, accusing Harvard of allowing discrimination tied to pro-Palestinian protests and continuing to factor ethnicity into admissions. Harvard denies the charges and has sued to block the funding cuts, calling them a threat to academic freedom. And House lawmakers are demanding answers from Harvard over partnerships with sanctioned groups, including those involved in the Chinese Communist Party's genocide against Xinjiang Uyghurs and forced organ harvesting. In a Monday letter to the university's president, lawmakers asked for documents and testimony before June 2nd. Joining us now to discuss is Sarah Parshall Perry. She's the Vice President and Legal Fellow at Defending Education. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you now. At heart is the accusation that Harvard trained members of the sanctioned paramilitary organization XPCC, a primary implementer of the CCP's genocide against the Uyghurs. First, how are you reading this whole situation?
Well, I have to tell you, it's incredibly damning for Harvard University, which is already facing quite a bit of federal investigation and federal interest, both from the Department of Education and the Department of Justice. But now what we're seeing from members of Congress is a revelation of jaw-dropping proportions. And this partnership with the XPCC, who is the primary implementer of genocide against 1.8 million Uyghur Muslims in the CCP, is really something to behold. Not only does it talk about some of the research that is transpiring, and this is research funded by an agent of an Iranian organization, the Iranian government itself, hosting and training members of other organizations who are China-based academics on policies related to scientific methods for organ harvesting. Now, that's particularly problematic, considering the fact that we know organ harvesting is among the multitude of civil rights and human rights abuses transpiring against Uyghur Muslims and other ethnic minorities in the CCP. So why use a China-based academic to perform research on organ harvesting? It really does boggle the mind. Some of this research for China-based academics was transpiring specifically to increase paramilitary application and aircraft safety. I don't think we want a stated communist party and one of the SDP persons of interest listed under federal law as being an organization to watch because of their affiliation with the CCP. I don't think we want them doing research in a military capacity, and yet that's exactly what seems to be happening.
Expanding on that, if Harvard is found to have violated these sanctions, what is next for Harvard?
Well, Harvard, first of all, could lose its tax-exempt status because what it's doing right now is using Department of Defense funding, DARPA funding, as it's called, to be able to funnel much of this research dollar spending through China, to be able to receive a lot of these sort of particular purported academic research projects. That partnership with a known state agent of a communist country is something that's going to be, I think, something worth investigating on the Department of Justice's account and even the Department of Defense, who is going to be very concerned about what seem to be potential violations of national security interests in this academic partnership.
And Sarah, in the letter, the lawmakers called for comprehensive records of Harvard's dealings with sanctioned Chinese entities, full details on events involving CCP-linked affiliates, and disclosures of any CCP-sourced gifts or donations. Harvard has acknowledged getting the letter, but it hasn't commented on the specifics. Given the scope of the letter's requests and Harvard's recent tensions with the administration, do you expect this investigation to drag out or a quick resolution?
This, I think, is going to drag out just like the other investigations have thus far. It's clear that Harvard is staking a claim and it wants to make sure it can continue to operate under business as usual. Well, that is not the MO, the modus operandi of this administration. And they want to make very sure that for benefit of enjoying tax-exempt status. The dollars that are being spent by American taxpayers are not going to fund terrorist organizations or paramilitary organizations based in SDP nations, which are hostile to American interests. This is something that's going to drag on for a long time. The list of documentation requested by the 3 GOP members of Congress is extensive. It's going to require Harvard to go back to the drawing board and provide some very difficult explanations for why exactly it is in bed with this organization.
A lot to watch for sure, Sarah. Parshall Perry, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.